All right, all right.
I put my armor on, show you how strong I am. I put my armor on, I'll show you that I am. I'm unstoppable. I'm a poster with no brakes. I'm invincible. I win every single game.
This guy,
I love that music.
bro. All
I
right,
wake up to
guys.
it.
Welcome back to For the Public. This is the show that misgenders, that doesn't believe in pronouns, that is misogynist, and better than that. What else are we, Karen Deep? We what?
We're racist.
Yeah, there we go. There we go. Yeah, all
You're so
right.
happy about it.
Yeah, because you got that right for once. All right, we're back with another episode. We're going to talk about a topic that we talked about off air last week. We're going to talk about it on air this week. Ooh. And that is the other myth, the other conspiracy of every time you hear climate change, they throw it out there. And we're not going to say climate change isn't real yet, but we're going to talk about the population myth of that there's too many people. You always hear this thing. I think Bernie Sanders mentioned it back in like 2015 or was it 2020, where he was like, "Yeah, maybe we should have less people." And there were
Around
also
that time,
others,
I do remember that.
yeah, and then others during like COVID were saying, "Oh, it's great because there's a lot of people dying and we do need less people." And I remember seeing like articles and people like saying like, "Oh, there's less COVID emission, there's less emissions during the pandemic because everything's locked down." And I'm like, "Yeah, obviously because there's nobody out there, there's nobody doing anything. Like everyone's indoors, nobody can work, everybody's broke, everybody's hungrier. If you were already broke during COVID, which was both of us, we were even broker after. So it's like obviously there's going to be
Yeah.
less emissions. Like I remember the articles of like the dolphins are back in Venice. It's like, yeah, but that's just because nobody's in Venice right now because nobody can be in Venice. Either everyone's dying, sick, or just not allowed to leave their homes. And so that's the that's like the stupid theory that they have of pretty much like depopulation is the word for it. They're depopulating. But then
Right.
when you look at the numbers, it's without any policy that they really want, there's already less people. So I was looking at the numbers. I heard this was from Peter Zahan, who's a expert, geopolitical expert. Now, a lot of he's kind of, I guess people could treat him like the Alex Jones of that area. It's like they don't want to listen to him, but he does have great insights, and you really never know who his sources are, but sometimes they turn out to be true. And so he was pretty much saying, the biggest problem that we have in America today. And he talked about China. China's really the focus. If you know China's situation is that their biggest problem is that there isn't enough people for the future. And a big part of that is the one child policy that they had, where they pretty much the state not only did it advocate or mandate the family size, but it pretty much said that you should have sons. That's what it advocated. It advocated that you have your firstborn be a boy, and then your secondborn you would hope it was going to be a boy, but if it was a girl, fine. You just cared that you're firstborn because obviously, if you only have two shots at it, it's not like you can go back and. Nowadays you can, but I don't know if they allow that in China. I don't think they allow sex change in China.
Oh, yeah, I don't think so.
I don't think so. So it's not
No.
like you can change it. Here in America, yes, you can. You can change your firstborn son to a woman. In fact, he might do it without
Sadly.
letting you know.
Yeah,
But
I might do it too.
there we go. So that's an example. And so in China, that can't happen, thankfully. But the problem is that there's like no women there now. So that's why you hear a lot of the sex traffic, a lot of the sex trade is between North Korean women and South Korean. The North Koreans pretty much, whenever there's a missing woman that goes out, they're either trafficking her to China to get, let's say, sold or to be impregnated by Chinese men because they don't have women. Not only that, they encourage abortions, which is always the communist playbook. They give women rights. They're like we empower women to have abortions, but it's really for our own nefarious purposes, and it's really also for the men because the men at the end of the day are making the decisions in those households, not the women. So I brought it back to
So,
the U.S. and I heard someone say, "Hey, there's less there's going to be less millennials and less Gen Zers in total. In fact, there already are than there were boomers and not silent Gen, but Gen X's. And I was like, whoa, that's insane. There's no policy. We don't have a policy that's advocating that. We don't have any, but what we do have is a popular culture and a political culture, mainly on the left, that has been spewing this lie about climate change that why would you bring children into the world in a world that's ending because of climate hysteria? And the conservatives don't care about climate change. They're having children because they're inconsiderate. But if you're considerate, you won't have children. So then you see a bunch of American families only having one or two children. And this is what you end up with. You end up with a smaller generation. So the total, if you didn't know this, the total amount of baby boomers born between that time, I think the time is like right after the war until maybe 1960, I think, maybe 1961, 1962. The total amount of them born in those years were over 76 million. Today in America, there's only 65 left. 65 million left.
Oh, wow.
And by 2030, they're estimating there's going to be 58 million. So Gen Z is actually right at this year the biggest percentage population, and they only have, I think, about 70 million people. That's 6 million less, right? So that's almost close to the amount of boomers that are today, but it's still like, I think boomers are like 22 or 24%, and Gen Z is 26% of the population today.
Wait, oh, okay.
Gen Z is 26% of the population. Millennials are less than that. I think millennials are third or second. I don't remember the figure, but there's less.
Now the question is, since we're at 26%, will we be having more babies or less babies?
There we go. It's like, what do you think? So now there's like this generational battle, and you've probably heard of it. Of the left likes to say Gen Z is more liberal and more progressive, and the right likes to say the boys in Gen Z are going to be more conservative. But that doesn't really matter at any point, because I think both are complete bullshit. I don't think either of them are politically conscious. They like to pretend they are, but they're also more egotistical. I've seen a lot of, like, in our generation, seem to throw things. Millennials and Gen Zers like to do this thing where they blame boomers for everything, but don't have any of the accomplishments boomers have. Boomers actually have accomplishments. Like, I get it. The greatest generation, the one that gave birth to the boomers, yeah, that is the greatest generation. Most of the men there fought in World War II. They fought in Korea. They grew up in the Great Depression. So they went through some real shit. But the boomers did too. Like, they did things. They kept this country afloat. In fact, they're still keeping it afloat. Now, you could also say that a lot of the boomers are ruining it, because a lot of them are still in power. But tell me what millennial or Gen Z politician out there, and there is no Gen Z politician, by the way, because that's our age. We're like the oldest of the Gen Zers. So it's like, well, tell me a guy my age that's actually doing something positive for this country, that's inventing something positive. None. Like Mark Zuckerberg, I don't think that's positive.
Zero.
No. They're all either joining the military for the benefits. The women are mostly on OnlyFans. The men are all depressed. I saw a stat, essentially, that like apparently it was like 40-something% of Gen Zers have a mental illness.
Wait, how much?
40-something%.
That is, oh my God.
20-something% of them claim they have PTSD.
From what?
Another 20-something% of them claim that they have ADHD. And then the other ones, I think, are just claiming that they're retarded for the sake of being retarded. So I really, this is the problem, is that, again, and your question is right, from what? And a lot of the left likes to say it's because of the climate. They call it climate angst, where people are pretty much just concerned that the world's not going to get any better. I think a perfect example of this is, remember when Obama came out and said, like, my daughter comes to me and she complains and cries about the world's going to end because of the climate, and no one cares about the climate. I think it was Michelle or Barack who was saying that. Big difference. They're both the same gender. They're both women. And so there was one of them pretty much saying, like, hey, I have the exact statistic here. 42% of them are diagnosed with a mental health condition, 19 through 24. Oh my Lord. That's even worse.
What?
Gen Z young adults aged 19 to 24. 42% of young adults 19 to 24 Gen Zs think or are diagnosed with a mental health condition. What the
Think.
fuck?
Okay.
Mental health. That's about half.
Now is this after they take like some kind of
This in
medications, or is it
2020.
like before they do anything?
This is in 2022 survey. So here's more. Oh my lord. So 27% of Gen Zers say that their mental health is fair or poor. 15% of millennials say the same thing. 13% of the Gen X's say that. At that time. That's at that time. So when they were that age, that's how many of them said that.
13%.
Oh, when the millennials were 19 to 24, 15% of them said that they had mental health conditions. When Gen X was 19 to 24, 13% said that they were doing that. When the boomers were 19 to 24, they said, fuck off. We're not a bunch of pussies. Here's what the worst thing is. This is gonna blow your head.
It's already blowing my head.
91% of Gen Z young adults say they've had one or more symptoms of stress, including sadness, depression, a lack of interest in activities, which is supposed to be like, which by the way just means that you're bored. That's really what that means. You're bored. But they say that's a mental health condition. A lack of energy, meaning they're lazy, but they're saying that's mental health. A lack of motivation, meaning they're also lazy. But that's a mental health condition. 91%. How many times have we not said that we're lazy or bored?
Your sure is 91%.
91%. A survey. This is the American Psychological Association. This is a legit place.
Send me proof.
All right.
I just 91%. Like how? I just don't understand.
Lord almighty. Gen Z adolescents, so teenagers before that, and before 19, 29% of them say they have poor mental health. 22 have considered suicide. 18 have made a suicide plan. 10 have attempted suicide. 42 have persistent feelings of sadness or hopelessness. Oh my lord.
Do you think that survey you mentioned about 2022, do you think that COVID played a huge role
Yes.
in people's mental
I think
problems?
so. But I think the biggest prerequisite for any of this, precondition for, is technology. This generation,
That's what, yeah.
after us, because we're the oldest of Gen Z. I think we're our years before the 2000s. I think we have the best of the non-technology, because when phones came in, that's when we really hit it in. Like we got the beginning of the phones in schools and the Facebook. Like when we were 13, 12, we were really getting into Facebook. That's when people were in. Like we had MySpace. Like I remember in elementary school, I think I got into, like, we had MySpace. Middle school,
I never used
had
MySpace before.
and I think like that era, like between middle school and the beginning of like before high school, that was the MySpace Facebook era. And then after
Pretty much.
that, and then high school was pretty much Twitter, IG, Kick. Like that was us. But we were the first ones to encounter that, because like the end of the millennials, which is kind of really blends in with us. Like that's what we really hit. So we kind of,
and we also saw a huge difference like in our elementary time. There's no technology at all.
No technology.
So we kind of played two parts at that era, and then when phones came in, like around when we were 13, 14. So we know what both sides feel.
Like we grew up in a millennial type of area, in a millennial type of world, honestly, because we didn't have, just like them, we didn't really have technology. We watched the same shows, the same games were around. Like we kind of grew up the same as the ends of the end of the, and I mean like the early 90s millennials. Like we kind of, that 90s group, that like those 90s kids kind of grew up the same way, instead of like these thousands kids and like tens kids. Like all they know is phones. All they know are phones, tablets, PlayStation, Xbox, like Switch, Wii, TikTok, Instagram. Like they don't know MySpace. They don't know MySpace. They don't know flip phones. You know what I'm saying? Like they don't know any of that. Like you ask them, like, "Oh, what's that? A toy?" Like, no, it's a flip phone. It was a phone. Like we used to have to call people on the phone. Nowadays, they just text. That's it.
Now, like people who were like born in the early 2000s, I'm pretty sure like there were some years where they weren't dependent on technology. But when you have the kids who were born in like 2010 or 2005, I guess
No, yeah,
they
that's like
no they haven't experienced both sides of
no,
what I mentioned before.
no.
You know,
It's like I don't
um,
know if those kids grew up pretty much like going to the park because we went to those things and we grew up that way because there was nothing else to do. Nothing like video games is it, but there was nothing else to do.
for me, it was just video games and parks. That's it.
Exactly. It
That
was like
was it for
just
me.
playing around outside. Like there was like you would have to go see your friend if you wanted to talk to them. You couldn't call them. You couldn't like maybe you could call them, but it's not like they were picking up the phone at the house. Like they weren't. It's like you had to go
Yeah.
see them. Like
Yeah,
uh,
it was either like it was either home phones or flip phones. That's it.
exactly. And we
I
didn't
miss
have
flip phones.
those. And like our kids like I know I'm different, but like kids our age, like we like kids like my age, we got phones like in middle school.
Yeah,
Pretty
I had
much.
my one of those.
Yeah. Like middle school, maybe elementary school, but not really because like there just weren't any things out there. Like elementary when we were in elementary school, there were still like flip phones were like the big thing. Then it was BlackBerry. BlackBerry was really what came really after flip phones.
I agree with you.
Yeah. And then
BlackBerry
came
was
in yeah,
massive.
and yeah, exactly. And then came in the smartphones. But I think technology is the big reasons like this generation has the mental health problems because especially social media because social media like if it was just phones because we grew up with just phones with no apps no social media like we had like the biggest deal on our phones was probably like Tetris, Sims, and Need for Speed on our phones games. That was the biggest thing we had, but we didn't have social media. So what I think is the because and I've dealt with this, I've dealt with the mental health problem of social media. It's that like you just feel I think most kids, and I don't know if this really applies to me but I can kind of relate to them I guess. It's like these kids nowadays, they see all these people having fun and living a great life on social media. But the reality is that a lot of those people aren't really living those lives. Those are moments in their individual lives. But since it's posted on social media, since it's always out there and they're always posting like, oh, so and so goes to the beach on a Wednesday or so and so's out on vacation, like they post the good stuff. They don't post negative stuff. So kids out there are looking at that and saying, like, why can't I do that? Why can't I have that? What's going on? Like and then they see the other stuff like the news. Every single other day, there's mass shootings. There's shootings of like black kids or by cops, and like it's all curated. By the way, it's not random, and it's not like
Yeah.
it's the media and popular culture pretty much makes it this way. Like you have to like it's that hustle culture, like where you have to hustle, pretend you're hustling, but you're really working at Target, and then like that culture of like I'm gonna show everything good about me on social media. I can never show my bad side, so I get the likes. So people tell me, "Oh my God, you're doing so great," and it's like, so the kids are looking at that and saying, "Oh my God, what if I don't do that?" I'm that's like their life is pretty much being judged or being predetermined by what they contribute on social media. And so if they don't have vacations, if they don't have like this cool life that they can put on social media, for them that's now not a good life.
Right. Yeah, that's
That's
true.
what's happening a lot of times. They won't admit it, but that's really what's happening a lot of times.
I feel like kids these days wanna become famous. Like
Yeah,
if you're like 13, 14 years old, you want to be TikTok famous or
because that's all they
Instagram.
know. They don't know anything else. It's like that's again the
But
popular
yeah,
culture.
and it's sad because they don't know the negative side of social media. So
No,
it does affect their like honestly people think I'm crazy that I said that I want my kids I don't want my kids to have any kind of phones or social media until they're 18. Am I
oh.
crazy for that?
I mean, honestly, with things nowadays, no, because like
Okay.
the crazy people are online.
I want my kids to be active, man. Like I don't want them to lay on the bed just phone like every single day, not participate in like
That's a
family
big
dinners or
problem.
like hangouts and stuff like that. Yeah, it is.
And it's like we're talking about the generational gap, not just because Gen Z and millennials are a smaller population. Like there's going to be less of them. Because this is the thing, like the boomers are at 65 or 68 million today, but the boomers were born from what like the boomers the last generation of the boomers was I believe I think 1964 19 like I'll look it up. It's
Oh
19.
yeah, I was gonna say like 55 or something.
So the boomers are pretty much right after the war from 46 to 64, 20 years. if you're telling me that there's a big drop off in boomers today after 60 years, and they're like they've already gotten to the same level as the millennials and the Gen Zers, that's a problem for Gen Z and millennials. That's a problem. Meaning that there's going to be less of them. And if there's a war like they went to, because a lot of those ended up going to places like Vietnam and Korea and the first Gulf, and then Iraq, Afghanistan, like those guys there's gonna be less and less of them. There's gonna be less and less of them. So if there's a war where millennials and Gen Zers have to go, there's gonna be less of them today. And the millennials already went through that because the millennials, a lot of them went to Iraq and Afghanistan. So they went through that, and then they went to other places like the ones Obama did. There's obviously less of them now because of things like that. And there wasn't a lot of casualties. There's only 2,000. But then there's the problem of increased mental health, suicides. There's people who think they're gay or trans, and now they're killing themselves. Like I think there's a survey saying, like 50% of Gen Z young adults that are gay, about half of them contemplate suicide. It's like that's unfortunate, but that's just a cruel reality of there's going to be less of them. Like there's just population is going to be less. Like
it's good you mentioned that part because it's crazy how high schools these days think that they're bi or gay, but they haven't done any kind of activity where they think that they're gay. It's like they want to be part of that specific group. They just want to, yeah. It's so crazy.
And a lot of the big problem that we have in this like intergenerational conflict between Gen Zers and millennials versus boomers and all that is really the belief that the young people, like our generation, seems to think that they have no ego, that they're humble. Exactly. You can't even like that. They think that they're humble and that they're gonna do even greater things in the world, but they haven't done.
I'm already doing one in the house.
Oh, exactly. And so the boomers, they have a track record. They can say that they did things. You may not like all of them, but they did things. They kept the world afloat. They kept the world order afloat for a couple of years. We may disagree with the outcome, but what signs are there that Gen Z is going to be better? Most of the young Gen Z thinks that they're gay or trans. And they do so as a result of the popular culture. Why? Because when you become gay or trans, you become this protected citizen. And then after that, they seem to think that they did something brave. If you talk to a lot of people, like if you see a lot of the influencers, and by the way, the influencers are a reflection of the popular culture and of the people. Why? Because if they did those things and did not become popular, they wouldn't be reflected. So if they did these things and they weren't popular, they wouldn't continue. But they did these things and they are popular. It's because people like this. People are in favor of this. So a lot of them, they do this because I feel really brave. Like you hear them all. You probably heard them say this. No one understands because I did something really brave.
I know. I hear that a lot.
You hear a lot of time, but it's like, what brave thing did you do? Confuse yourself into thinking you're a woman? Confuse yourself into sucking someone's dick and thinking you're gay? Like, is that what you did? That's really
what gets me really mad is when they say I did something brave way more than the military.
A lot of them believe that. A lot of them mock the military. They mock people that give their lives to this country when they would never do anything for that except for themselves. They would give their lives for their brand. And that's the thing. Everybody just monetizing themselves. They view themselves as like these commodities, as these products, as these material things.
It's selfish.
And then exactly, it's selfish. And then you notice this generation is less godly, it's less religious. It doesn't believe in any faith. It claims it believes in science, but doesn't really question science or know what science is. So when Dr. Fauci came around saying that I'm the science, what did they do? They kissed his ass and then sucked his dick and then followed him wherever. But they didn't actually do anything to follow the science. They don't know what that means. They blindly follow. So it's like it's a bunch of hypocrisy.
It is. I agree.
Yeah. And it's all this egomania. And the big problem is that we're in this like conflict now with China, because China is really going to be our biggest enemy going forward. They are. Even if you don't want to believe it, that I know there's some out there like General McGregor, I think, who was on Patrick Bet-David's podcast about 2 months ago. He doesn't believe the Chinese are that big of a threat. I think Alex Jones doesn't really see them as the biggest threat. I think Peter Zeihan doesn't really see them as the biggest threat because they're on the decline. But I do. They are the biggest threat. Why? Because they pointed their attention towards us. they want, before they have that decline, if it comes, they want to be on top. They want to have a feeling what it's like to be on top. And there's less of us than there are of them. Even if there's less of them, they're still there's still more of them than there are us. And if Gen Z has less children, because the Gen X's and the Boomers, the liberal ones, convinced millennials to have less children, convinced Gen X to have less children because of climate hysteria, or also because of things like abortion. That's a problem, because that means there's going to be less police officers, there's going to be less firefighters, there's going to be less soldiers to get from. There's going to be less people around. And not only are there less people, but we're already running into the problem that there's less qualified people. Less qualified people because of DEI, because of these diversity, inclusion, because of race quotas, because of the fact that they have to be trans or they have to be a specific gender. But they're never trained. It's not because that pilot's the best, because that surgeon is the best, because they graduated at the top of their class. No. And it's not even that. It's like they might have graduated at the top of their class because they're black, or because they're a woman, or because they're trans, or because they're gay. Like nowadays, like everything's so skewed between identity, because the Democrats believe that demography is destiny, and they don't really care what the cost of that is as long as they stay in power. So that's the biggest conflict we have. That's the biggest concern. That's not like I don't like. Yeah, if there's less of these little punks, I'm for it. But there's a price to that. The boomers are
For the
gone.
long term, yeah.
Yeah, the boomers
Yep.
in the long term will not be here. By the time we get to 2030, 2040, they're going to be senior citizens and dying. They're going to be not useful to us. The Gen Xers are going to be the new boomers, and they're a big population, but still, they're not going to be around forever. They're retiring. The boomers and Gen Xers are retiring, and it's the millennials. Like I heard someone say, like, "Hey, have you told me, like, hey, is a plane ride safer today or 10 years ago?" He would have never imagined 10 years ago saying, "Not today." You know what I mean? Like that person believes that like their pilot 10 years ago was more qualified and more prepared and more talented 10 years ago than today. And why? Well, because a lot of the pilots today are not. There aren't a lot of many. There aren't a lot of them, and the companies are essentially recruiting on the basis of racial lines. They're saying we need more black women, we need more Hispanics. Not only do we need that, we need women in general. And something Jordan Peterson talked about. You can have equal workforces, but one of those workforces, particularly the women, are going to be of less quality. It's like the engineers. Engineering is already a heavily male dominated field. And so if you make a quota saying we need 50% male and female, if there's only 15% of women, that's not 50% of women. That's 15% of women.
Yeah, you'll get less.
You're essentially taking, of that 15, you have to get the best, and then the rest of them to make up that 50% are not going to be as talented as the rest of the women, or mainly as the men, because it's not possible that all 15% of women are more qualified than the men.
What would you do if we heard that your pilot doesn't have any knowledge of being a pilot just because of that certain race? Like, what would you do at that point?
I'm getting off.
How would you get off?
I'm getting off the plane. Are you telling me that they already got out there?
Yeah, they already got out there.
Oh my God! Yeah, I'm praying. I'm done. I'm out.
Just hope that you bring yourself a parachute.
Oh my God! I'm out. I'm dead.
I mean, it's scary to hear that. Like you're already in a plane, and next thing you know, your pilot's not trained.
Your pilot's like barely made it out of training, pretty much. It's like they barely made it out. And in fact, I mean, we're already seeing the signs. The amount of close collision calls that the FAA has reported is like at an all-time high.
Really?
Time high. And it's mainly because of all these new pilots that do not know how to fly planes the right way. They're not as qualified or as talented. They're not. That's really, and a lot of them is due to the racial quota that they have. They have to have black, they have to have black women. They have to have Hispanic women. They have to have white women. They have to have Asian women. Asian women can't even drive cars.
They can't even. Yeah, I was gonna say they can't even drive cars.
They can barely drive a Kia. You think they can drive a Boeing?
That's hilarious. That's insane, man.
No, it's insane. And so it's gonna get worse. And I'm sorry to say that it's gonna get worse because of
Be
these.
sorry.
That's gonna get worse. It's gonna get even worse because there's gonna be less of the people that have been kind of keeping things right. Like that doctor of yours that's in his 50s, 60s, he's retiring soon. Next thing you know, you're gonna have a Asian woman who does not know any English and barely got out of that school. Why? Because she was pretty much passed along.
Luckily, both my regular doctors and my eye doctor are pretty young, so they ain't gonna retire soon. I
Yeah, but
hope.
that just means that they're not as qualified, meaning they suck.
No, they qualify.
Barely.
Well, look at
Barely
me. Like
got
I'm in
there.
shape. I'm in shape. You know, my eyes are good. They're not cockeyed looking. You
Bro, you have glasses. You have some heavy ass glasses. Look at them. Look at them lenses. Those things like bulletproof windows.
know, these are 4K lenses. I do have shit eyes.
My God. God. No, but that's the biggest problem we're gonna have is essentially that, and then we don't have enough people. Because remember, you said this. By the way, you said this in our conversation off air that when these kids get asked what they want to be, and you kind of mentioned it a couple minutes ago. These kids, they don't have any. It's not like back in the day where the boomers and the Gen X's and the millennials, they wanted to be actual careers. They wanted to be doctors or veterinarians or police officers or firefighters, teachers. These new generations, they don't want to be any of that. What do you always hear when you ask them, what do you want to be?
Actor, a YouTuber, a TikToker.
They
All
want to be
these
Jake
useless
Paul. They want to be Jake Paul and Ethan Klein, retarded. They want to be retarded. That's what they want to be because they
I'll
don't
be
know anything.
retarded.
Because popular culture has made people like Cardi B, Billie Eilish, Kanye, Jay-Z, all these people that don't
I want to be a
advocate for anything,
rapper. I want to be a
they want to be that.
singer.
So black people in the hood, all they want to be is a rapper, an athlete, or they want to be like an OnlyFans pimp. They want to be an e-pimp. Or these women, all they want to do is OnlyFans, uh, or marry into the middle class and then be a teacher. And then that's it. But they're not a good teacher. They're just doing this because they married some rich dude. That's why it's like there's no there's no actual orientation towards something. Like the previous generations, from what I observed, is that they worked and they had this collective goal in mind of improving themselves and then their future generation. Like no matter what you think, they did try to live better lives so that their children could live better lives. But now these kids are not, they don't want to do that because a lot of them also don't want to have children, which is really the point of this whole conversation is that the overpopulation is not real. There's less people nowadays. If there's less people in China, through data, it's not us just if there's less people in America, and if we're forecasting that the millennials and the Gen Zers do not want to have children, then overpopulation cannot be continued to be spoken about as a real thing. It's not real. In fact, I saw people like Elon Musk and others pretty much say, in fact, there is no overpopulation. There's underpopulation. There's not enough people here. And not only is it there are enough people here, there's not enough qualified people here. And so what is the government trying to do is that they're trying to do immigration, which is also not right. Because that's not real. You can't keep a national identity alive by bringing millions and millions of people to fill the roles of those who are gone. You can't do that and then keep the identity. Then it just becomes like a shitty airport, like Newark or JF or LaGuardia. Like that's really
What is the main goal from the government? Like, what do you think they're trying to do when they give out that message? Oh, it's overpopulated. We need to do something about it.
I think they
Like, what do
want
you think is
power.
the main goal?
Remember what they always say, we need to do something about it. They want to mobilize a movement where people are going to vote and let them have more power to do these type of things. The left that's in power does not like the right. They do not want them. Not only they don't like them, but they don't want them to exist, and they don't want them having any influence. They wish, they wish they could have the power in Florida or Texas, mainly Texas, because Texas always has a great economy. They wish they had those resources. Remember, a big target of theirs was the military. The military for a long time was like a conservative stronghold. A lot of conservative men and women joined the military, mostly men. Let's not kid ourselves. It's like they were in that military and they rose through the ranks and they developed a culture of meritocracy where you work hard. And that's all been destroyed by liberals who think they're men, but they're actually pussies. and they've joined the military and they're rising in the ranks because the liberals have something the conservatives don't have yet. The liberals are good pencil pushers. They like sitting in meetings and they like doing bullshit to get their rank up. So they like doing officey kind of things, bullshit type of things, paperwork. They're willing to stay in the meetings and do the BS. The conservatives don't like that. The conservatives want to get to work and do what they're told. They want to go in and fight the wars and they want to come home. The liberals don't like that. So now liberals, you've noticed it. All these new generals and all these new admirals. I mean, we have an admiral who's a woman, but he's actually a man.
Yeah.
He's actually a man. And he's never even served in the military. He was just created, made an admiral.
Because yeah, I was gonna ask, like, what kind of qualifications?
None. He's a man who thinks he's a woman now. He's Dylan Mulvaney's father. That's essentially it.
Ooh.
That's Dylan Mulvaney's father. So that's pretty much it. That's pretty much it. And so their goal is to take over this country's institutions and then make people do things. They want to coerce. That's what they want to do. They want to take over. They're all communists in the closet. And they're coming out slowly. I mean, if you know, like, I always hear the progressives and the progressives like to pretend as if they're not the same thing as the Democrats. Joe Biden is a progressive. He's running like a progressive. I mean, you might pretend that he's not because he's not rising the minimum wage, but he's doing everything you wanted him to do. He did try to cancel student debt. He just did it the wrong way. And he did it the same way Bernie Sanders would have. Bernie Sanders and Barack Obama, by the way, Barack Obama, who was the first progressive president that they loved. Progressives used to love Obama until they didn't. And then,
why is that?
Well, because he was black, he was young, he used to talk a big talk. He used to talk about free healthcare. He used to talk about college forgiveness. He used to talk about making college free. He used to talk about ending wars. He used to talk about closing Guantanamo. He used to talk about immigration reform. It was all bullshit, though. It was just talk. And then they hated him because they found out, like what I've been saying forever, is that was just talk. He's none of that. He's actually an elitist. And not only is he actually one, he's always been an elitist. He's just good at bullshitting you. And the progressives who think they're smart.
Really is.
Yeah.
Really is, yeah.
And the progressives who think they're smart. They like to think that they're smarter than the conservatives. That's why you always hear them saying, we have to bring the conservatives over to our side because they need to realize we're on their side. It's like, you're not right, though. It's like there was this guy I was watching. He went to a Trump rally in Virginia, in West Virginia, and in that area in Pennsylvania. He went and toured and he spoke to people. And his takeaway was the stupidest thing ever. He thought that the Trump supporters were pretty much telling him that there was an appetite for a leftist labor movement in America. Which there isn't. There isn't. It's not real. You know why? Because every single progressive is a horrible marketer. They do not know how to market to conservatives. Why? Because every single time a progressive comes out, they're extremely embracing of socialism. They love Cuba. They love, you know why they hate U.S. interventionism? You know why they hate our U.S. foreign policy? Because they don't like the fact that Cuba has an embargo. By the way, only by the United States. Cuba only has an embargo by the United States. The Europeans trade with Cuba all the time. They don't like that. They don't like the fact that we're hostile to China. They don't like the fact that we're hostile to all these communist countries. They don't like the fact that we're anti-communist, or we used to be. That's why the progressives don't like us. It's not because the communists also did the same things America did, and far worse. It's because we're opposed to them. They like to pretend they're not, but let's not kid ourselves. Let's not kid ourselves. When the Chinese go to Africa and they buy up the entire continent by handing out money and taking their natural resources, do I hear progressives complaining? No. Why? Because I've debated progressives and they ignore that. In fact, you know what they say? But the United States does that. No, we don't. The Africans never let us do that. The Africans have never let the Americans do that. You know who does that? American companies like Exxon and the other ones. They're the ones who go to Africa and buy and make contracts, not the American government. Now, yes, is the American government intervening in Iraq? But are we just forgetting the Soviets intervene in Greece and Poland and Eastern Germany and across the Eastern Europe by making revolutions? That's what they always did. I mean, this idea that like they're the biggest joke on the planet. I never respect progressives because of that, because they like to pretend that they're the smarter and that they're on the right side. It's like we're gonna bring them on our side. It's like, wait, why do I have to be convinced? First of all, our movement, the MAGA conservative movement, the populist movement on the right, actually got a president elected, Donald Trump. The progressives got fucked in the ass by Hillary Clinton, and in the first glance voted for her because they did. They voted for her, and then they voted for Biden. Now I'm supposed to think they're smart. It's like Elon Musk all over again. Elon Musk is like, I'm smart. Yeah, you voted for Joe Biden and Hillary Clinton, and you lied to Trump about it twice.
Yeah, you did.
The fact that you're now pretending to be a Republican is cute, but it's kind of not. It's too late. Like I don't respect that about you. Like, get the hell out of here with that. I don't want to hear your political opinions. You're smart, but you voted for Biden. Hell, you're not smart. You're stupid. That's really it. It's like you're not smart. No one smart should be voting for Biden, especially in 2020 when he's old and decrepit. Like you saw him.
I think we all saw.
Yeah, we all saw, except for Elon Musk, who voted for him. Voted for him. Yeah, it just pisses me off. He's one of them. He's like a millennial. He's a wannabe millennial.
Everyone pisses you off, man.
They do. They do piss me off.
Who else pissed you off?
You.
What did I do?
By being a fake, you're a fake boomer.
Oh, my.
Well, all right. Let's move on to the next topic. I guess I wanted to make a little mention of there's about a month ago or two in July, actually. Not a month ago. In July, towards the end of July, a principal out of Toronto, Ohio, in Ontario, very popular and beloved principal, committed suicide. His name was Richard Bilkszto. Richard Bilk. Let me see. Let me just get it right because I don't want to insult his memory because this is serious. Bilkszto. Bilkszto. So Richard Bilkszto was a Bilkszto. So Richard Bilkszto was 60 years old, and he was a principal from the Toronto District School Board. And he committed suicide after pretty much being harassed and bullied after he was forced to take DEI classes, so diversity, equity, and inclusion classes, by this instructor called Kiki Ojo Thompson. She made a couple comments pretty much saying that the biggest comment that she made was essentially the one that Canada was more racist than the United States. And that
is that true?
Let's just before we get into that, she essentially said that no matter what you think of it, no matter how crazy that sounds, Canada is more racist because it embraces a white supremacist system. And what is that? The monarchy. Because she claims that the Canadians not only do they have the monarchy, but they embrace it and celebrate it. And that means that they're celebrating a huge part of a colonial system that oppressed the black people for centuries and still does to this day because she says she's oppressed. Despite, by the way, being the founder of an institute that's being paid thousands of dollars to yell at white people, which is, by the way, I can do that. So she essentially said that Canada's more racist than the United States for those reasons. And then this teacher, this principal, who, by the way, taught in the inner cities of Buffalo, New York, in poor communities. He was a principal, a school teacher in Buffalo, New York. And he had mostly black students. And he pretty much said, that's not true. Canada is not a racist country. We're not a white supremacist country. And the fact that you're saying that that people are having a horrible time here, he pretty much said that the United States is worse than Canada, which I disagree with. But for the sake of defending him, because I'm going to defend him, he pretty much gave reasons. And by the way, these are legitimate reasons. They're not wrong. He's not wrong. These are facts. This is true, not except for the healthcare part. But he pretty much went down the line. Healthcare here is free, and Americans don't have healthcare, and that's true. To say that the quality is better is, either or. But then again, when you're not paying for something, and by the way, you are paying for it through high taxation. So that's the reality. You are paying for it through high taxation. But when something's free and you're not paying for it directly out of pocket, it does feel free. So he was pretty much saying that what's going on?
Sorry. I was being lectured.
So he's pretty much saying that he pretty much said that we have free healthcare here, etc. But the other thing that he mentioned, which I did not know, which is actually a good point and something that probably should get looked into. I do know this about America. So America's education system is pretty much funded through through taxpayers. So if you're in a city, if you live in a district, a school district that has a higher tax base, like for example Milburn, New Jersey, which has one of the best school districts in the state and even in the country, you notice that it has some of the highest taxpayers in the state. So it has some of the biggest taxpayer pools by quantity and also by the amount of income.
Okay.
Compare that to Plainfield, New Jersey, that's poorer, has more people, but still has a lower, it's low class. So the funds aren't the same. In Canada, it's different. In Canada, it's all equal. So no matter the income, no matter the tax brackets in that school district, the richest district gets the same amount of money than the poor with the poorest district. So the richest get the same amount of money as the poorer. He pointed out and said, hey, we actually have an equitable system here. Everyone gets the same. There's the same outcome. There's the same outcome here. Every school district gets the same amount of money in funding. The richest.
But quick question about that. Do you think that's a good system that we can use in America, or how does that work?
It gets complicated. That's why it sounds good, but it gets complicated.
Yeah, because it does sound good, but like
it sounds good, but it sounds complicated because then it's like who decides what money is what.
Okay.
So are those schools underfunded, or are they overfunded, or are they not even well funded at all? Because if everyone's getting the same money, but it turns out that every school district is getting $1 million, that might not bode well. If there's a school district, for example, New York is getting $1 million, but remember, New York has tens of thousands of kids. And what if Plainfield's getting $1 million? And it's like, yeah, but there's only 1,000 kids here. You know what I'm saying? So then it's like there's these discrepancies. So it's a good and a bad thing. I'm sure that they figure it out. They probably overfund, which is always what they love to do. They overtax and they overfund. But but the point is, like, he's actually doing something that nobody in America does in these classes. He's pushing back. He pushed back. The problem was that was really the beginning of the end. Because as she did with most people, she said, essentially, she laughed and said, you and your whiteness think that you can tell me what's really going on with black people? That's a legit quote. That's a real quote. She essentially said that because he's white, he does not have the right to speak for black people, or not even for black people. Essentially, he's not allowed to refute what a black woman is saying about a particular group of people. So because he's white, he can't make comments on black people. So he can't say, hey, we need to give more money because he's white. He can't say that because that's rooted in white supremacy. It's a white supremacist thing to comment on black people.
What?
That's what she said. And she essentially then said that he was the example of white supremacist resistance. And she was mocking him and laughing and saying that I'm really lucky. I'm really lucky that I have the perfect example here in front of me. Essentially making this man, a man who has dedicated his entire life to education, who really cares about what he's doing, his craft. He was beloved. In fact, he was more liked by his peers, by his colleagues, and by the students than anybody in that woman Kiki Ojo Thompson bullshit, in her bullshit life. More people liked him and believed that he was a good people than what this bullshit woman is. What this piece of shit woman is. This racist piece of shit woman. Because that's really what she is. There's no backing around that. This is a piece of crap. This is a living pile of pathetic garbage. Is Kiki Ojo Thompson. And she can sue me, but I'll say this in court. She is garbage. Her blackness, her womanness, all of that, what she likes to claim is garbage. Because this isn't real. She mocked that man and harassed him. Essentially, every time they had a class, she made it a point to claim that this man was racist and that he was an example of white supremacy. and that she was going to point that out every class. And the people in that class defended her instead of him. And then the worst part came is that when it came for him to renew his contract, the school board said no because of the reputation that he had, the hit that he took in his reputation, because of this vile piece of trash. What she did to him.
By just one person with no kind of evidence or anything like that to back her up. She just
no.
Wow.
And why? Because no one had the gall to stand up and say, "Woman, you are batshit crazy." Everything you said. This is gonna be me if I ever end this class. Everything you're saying is incorrect. This is complete trash, complete garbage. You know why? Because we grew up with black people, we grew up with Hispanics. We did not grow up with white people. We went to school where there was no white person. It was Hispanics, blacks, and like 3% Asian, meaning you and a bunch of, and like 7 other people. This was our high school experience where people fully develop. This was our high school. There was no white kids. Black people, when we were growing up in high school and growing up, they did not talk like this. They did not act like this. It wasn't all about race. White supremacist was not a word. It wasn't a thing. It was like KKK was like the word.
We did have a lot of white teachers, and we never said anything like
Nobody ever made a point. No one ever thought there was people.
Not even the teachers, not even the students. None of us talked about race.
There was never a mention of race. Never. Never a mention that, look, you guys are victims, you guys are this. I'm not going to criticize you because I'm a white teacher and I can't talk about people. It's like, yeah, sometimes in a while you would joke around and be, but this was not a time. But this woman's like 50 years old. She's not a kid. But she is a toxic, resentful, vile piece of human trash, a waste of space. And she did this to this man who was well liked by his community, who did nothing wrong. All he did was point out facts. All he did was what all these people who love democracy, because this is what they do. They love talking about how they love democracy. A fundamental of democracy or any civilization is being able to debate facts, have a conversation in goodwill. This woman did not believe in this. This woman essentially said, no, you do not have the right because of your skin. Something non-consequential, something you had no control over. That woman had no control over the fact that she was born black. She didn't. She was born black out of random miracle by God. That was it. Just like how God made that man white. But he did not make that man a white supremacist. But he did make a mistake with this Kiki lady. He did make that mistake. That was a mistake on his part. Sorry, Lord, I love you, but you made a mistake. That's a piece of trash. That's a waste of space. We don't need that. We could do with less of her. And so the fallout was essentially, I'm going to share pictures here so people kind of know what we're getting at. I'm going to share here, who these people are and things like that. So this is Kiki Ojo Thompson. This is the woman who essentially does the racial training. This is her. And this is the principal that killed himself because she essentially said, that he was a racist, pretty much saying, this is a quote. One of the ways white supremacy is upheld, protected, reproduced, upkept, defended is through resistance. And like I said, I'm so lucky, she said before laughing. Who would have thought my luck would show up so well last week that we got a perfect evidence, a wonderful example of resistance that you all got to bear witness to. So we're going to talk about it because, it doesn't get any better than this. She continued as others chimed in to back her up. The next day, Bilkszto filed for sick leave. They looked into the incident and found that Ojo Thompson's conduct was abusive, egregious, and vexatious, rises to the level of workplace harassment and bullying. Yet, he said that his reputation was nonetheless ruined, pretty much. After he took a 6-week medical leave, the district refused to reinstate his contract, effectively saying that he was fired. And they said that the refusal to reinstate was really a result because of his fallen reputation or a retribution for having the board look into this. So that could be another thing. They pretty much said that. The lawyer says, unfortunately, the stress and effects of these incidents continue to plague Richard. Kojo says that it's an inaccurate and incomplete picture of what happened during the training sessions, but they are audios essentially of what she said and what she acted. These are not just quotations. These are audios. I mean, this is a vile woman.
This is crazy. It should be in charge for us somehow.
Well, there's a lawsuit, but it's like it's very different. It's very difficult in Canada. Canada does not have free speech laws, so it might be difficult. And honestly, with the government now, if the government feels the courts there are political, so if some judge feels that hey, he was being racist by attacking a black person by really just responding, he's dead now, but she'll win. She might win, and the judge might even throw this out because he's dead. So they're gonna be like, well, there's no point in judging this. But this is a woman who should not have a business. She should not be receiving federal subsidies by the Canadian government to be teaching classes. In fact, she should be unemployed. She just should be. This is a vile woman. And I'm sorry to say that she just is. I mean, there's nothing positive about it. But these stories piss me off. They really do, because there are people that are really dedicated to their craft. This was a man who had a track record of being dedicated to education for all, education in particular for young kids who did not come from rich backgrounds. And this woman essentially turned him into someone racist by making lies, spewing lies about racism and white supremacy, and then lying about him and using for her personal ego. And it's just so sad to see. Like he killed himself. He committed suicide, and it's sad to see because we need more people like him and less people like her in this world, really. And it's just so sad.
I do think we also need a bit more people to be a bit more aggressive against this kind of attack. Come on, white people, do better. I'm kidding.
No, it's everybody. No, it's like
No, it is everybody.
it's everybody. Like
I'm just being an idiot.
no, I know. It's like everybody has to like. This is what happens when people stand up, because you rarely see people actually standing up in meetings and saying, "Hey, wait a second." And by the way, not conservatives. This man is not a conservative. He was a liberal. And I believe he was gay. He was like a gay liberal teacher, educated. He was a principal of a school. He didn't have any children, I think. Like this was a man who was not a conservative. He was not a Trump. He was not, in any ways political. And this woman, really, just because he stood up and said, "Hey, no, you're wrong. This is a great country." Like he was standing up for his country. And I disagree. I don't think Canada is greater than America, but he does believe it, and good for him. All to him. But this is a man who believed in his country. He said, I'm not going to let this woman, insult this country. This country is doing great things for you, for me. This woman is receiving federal tax dollars by the Canadians to teach racism and bigotry and zealotry and anti-whiteness. And this woman is essentially saying she's oppressed. She's not oppressed. She's pathetic. She's garbage. That's what she is. So unfortunate to see that this happened to this poor man. But we can't stay here. We have to keep going. Honestly, if you're in a meeting and you hear stuff like this, fight it, because that's the only way you end it. You fight it. This is a martyr. This is not this is a martyr of a movement that needs to be jump started, pushing back against this bullshit, wasting taxpayer dollars on DEI, diversity, equity and inclusion courses, to teach what? Essentially to teach you that white people are horrible, they're evil, and that no matter what they do, they will always be stained with the legacy of slavery, something they had nothing to do with. Something blacks are not only are victims of, but actually perpetrators of. They enslaved people.
Yeah.
They sold slaves to the Europeans. In Africa, they enslaved each other and sold each other slaves. Yet white people have to take the bait for centuries of something that they didn't do.
It's just crazy that they can't even at least go do a little research on history. It's not just white people. It's like Arabs, Chinese. They've all done slaves. Everyone's done it. But it's like they just make it seem like it's a white thing.
From the days that Jesus walked this earth, there's been slavery. by Arabs, by blacks, by
That's
whites,
the very beginning. Yeah.
everybody, the Native Americans, the Aztecs that the liberals love so much, but the Mexicans claim that they pretend to be like, but they aren't. The Aztecs, they don't exist. They enslaved other Native American groups in Mexico. That's why their empire fell apart when the Spanish arrived, because everybody hated them. They enslaved each other. Native Americans enslaved each other, but that gets a pass because they're not white. Because in this modern age, being white is disgusting to them. They hate that.
They really did a good job at fucking these people's brains up.
And we talked about
They
it in
really
the
did.
first side. We talked about it in the other site, in the other section. I mean, essentially, this new generation, Gen Z, pretty much buys into this. The white people there
Fuck
have
that,
these
man.
skills.
If they ever become racist to you, be racist back. Nah, fuck that. Fuck
That's
that.
the lesson, kids. If they're
Yes.
racist, be racist back.
Like I always said, stay racist. Because you never know what's gonna hit.
Never know when to bring it up. What would you say? What would you say to this woman in that meeting? Would you say anything?
I'll say a lot of things. So
What would you say?
my mom's at home. I can't say stuff.
Oh my god. Oh,
But you know me. You know me. I will say.
he says he's gonna say the N word 20 times. That's what he would be saying. He would be saying it so much. He'd be saying, you know what? He'd be saying the longest N word in that room. That's the thing.
Yo,
His response.
that's how it's gonna be.
That's that would be his. He would say, he'd be like, you know what? No, I'm gonna say the longest N word ever. And the beep, beep. It's just him saying that one word. It's just him he's just saying that one word. He's enunciating every syllable.
Oh my god, it was funny.
And then he just ends like, gah.
He said all you can hear is beep.
That's it. That's all you're gonna hear in the clip. It's gonna be him saying the longest N word known to mankind. The
Oh my
longest
god.
N word in the history of mankind is what you're gonna say to her. And I agree.
I swear, man. Why do minorities gotta ruin the white country, man?
I can't take it seriously. Oh my god.
I need a tissue.
Oh man. All right, so we're gonna end this up with a little light topic, because one of Barack Obama's chefs died in a pool, and I was told today that there's more juicy details to it, and I don't know if you heard him, but apparently this guy, there's a big conspiracy here now. Apparently, the Obama chef was called at 10 at night. There's a whole thing with the Obamas. A whole thing with the Obamas. I mean,
Dude, honestly, when I first heard that news, it's obviously a conspiracy.
but it's like the Obama chef, apparently he went there, he left his house at like 10 p.m. to go to the Obamas, and that's when he died. And his wife has no idea why he went. He just says that, he went there and he never came back. And he took his phone with him, and like there's like no autopsy. The phone's like, there's nothing gonna be done. There's no investigation. Um, like it's just something completely weird.
So
And
Michelle Obama doesn't know what really happened. What she wasn't
no,
at
the
the house.
chef, the family of the chef. I mean, there's an article here in the AP. The Obama's doctor did not conduct his late chef's autopsy. And the 911 call was not delayed. In fact, the 911 call is not coming out. We do not know who came up.
Oh yeah, I heard about that. Yeah.
So like, there's a huge problem here. And by the way, this is a man who's over 6 feet tall, and he was swimming in a pool that was
He's a big dude.
He was found in like a 7.8 foot pool. He drowned in an 8 foot pool. By the way, this is a man who could have gone to the bottom, pushed upwards, and then gotten out and got it onto the into the side. By the way, you know why? Because I've done this. I've been in deeper pools and I've fallen down, and then what you do is you just push yourself back up. You go down and you just push yourself back up. Like there's a thing, like this man essentially, like the 911 call was apparently like came like hours after. But now there's like an article saying that this didn't happen. But like there's all these conspiracies going on around. So now I'm pretty interested. Why did this happen? Like if and we're at a time in this country now where we're not believing the stories when it comes to the elites because we've seen too much. We talked about the Clinton kill list. The Obama kill list is going to be a thing now, and I'm going to quote it. Like we do not know what happened. There's details that are not looking up. Like why was he there? Why was the 911 call delayed? Why isn't there an autopsy out yet? We know he's drowned, but why can't we see the body? Like what is going on here? And the wife doesn't understand why he left. Now all of a sudden there's these letters of the Obamas. Like Obama's old letters. Like essentially he told an ex. In 1982 he sent a letter to his ex. This is what it said. In regard to homosexuality, I must say that I believe this is an attempt to remove oneself from the present. A refusal, perhaps, to perpetuate the endless farce of earthly life. You see, I make love to men daily, but in the imagination. A 20-year-old Barry Hussein Obama wrote this to Alex McNear, 1992, who was his ex. She was white, by the way. There's a book called Rising Star that has a bunch of these letters in there. And they're in this book, essentially talking about pretty much like the things he would say to her. This is before he married Obama, Michelle, Big Mike, and
Big Mike.
And so Emory University owns a lot of these letters. But there's an author, Jim Garrow, who's essentially David Garrow. I mean, he's written a letter. He's written a book. I mean, about these letters, essentially talking about Obama, and I knew that, like these were all things that were known, by the way. Which was a big failure on part of the McCain campaign. Not only that, but really his relationship with Jeremiah Wright, a very radical pastor, Baptist preacher, who's very anti-white and anti-American, very racistly anti-white, kind of like we talked with the DEI Kiki bullshit woman,
Kiki Palmer.
Kiki wasted space, and essentially like Obama has this really complicated past that nobody wanted to look into, and the McCains essentially did not want to talk about this. They explicitly told the world they were not going to talk about Jeremiah Wright. They were not going to talk about his time in Yale and Harvard smoking weed, these letters. By the way, these were letters that were known at the time. These letters resurfaced in 2008, but they were not talked about, mainly because the Republican campaign, McCain and Romney, refused to talk about this. Refused. Yet Obama and his wife constantly called the McCains racist, anti-Semitic, Islamophobic. They compared him to Hitler. They called him fascist. They said that he was a warmonger. They called him all kinds of names. But McCain, pretending to be a gentleman who started a bunch of wars, with the help of Obama, by the way, they became best friends and started wars all over the place, fucking us up. We knew this. This was known. So I knew about this little past that he had, but no one would have mentioned it, which is why in my mind, my fantasy is, what if Donald Trump ran in 2008? He would have never let this not be mentioned. In fact, he would have been mentioning this every single day.
That would be interesting,
which is an interesting scenario.
Yeah.
Because Trump is really the successor of what the Republicans used to campaign like in the 1980s. I mean, they used to campaign this way. They used to be fierce. They used to not be pussies. They used to come out there and they used to knock you in the face and essentially say, bring up all your dirt. Say, hey, hey, you're gay. You have hidden letters. You're not being honest. Your ex-girlfriend says this. They would leak this kind of stuff. And the McCains were a different wing. They did not want to do that. They wanted to win, but be nice. And that got us nowhere. We lost 2 elections. And there was a very Lee Atwater approach. I mean, Trump really ran like a Lee Atwater type of person. Lee Atwater was George Bush's campaign manager in 1988 when he won against Dukakis, and he was very scorched earth. Any dirt he could find, he would present. Any way he could make Dukakis look badly as a politician or as a father, as a person, he went with it. And Trump was the same way. Is the same way. You know, it's not that he's looking for dirt. Trump in a way is, if you insult me, I insult you. I'm not going after you, but if you go after me, I'll go after you. Lee Atwater was kind of the same way. If you're coming hard at us, we're going to come even harder at you. And I'm going to bring all the dirt I can. And Trump doesn't mind getting dirty. And we see it. It's funny to us. We love it. But the other side hates it. And so they're not used to it. And Trump would never have allowed Obama. Like when Romney was debating Obama, where Candy Crawler, the CNN woman, essentially took the microphone out of Mitt Romney's hands and essentially saying, "You are not allowed to respond. In fact, you're wrong." Essentially telling a presidential candidate, the anchor of a presidential debate, saying, "Mr. Romney, you're wrong and you cannot continue speaking." Essentially, that's what she said. Donald Trump would have never allowed that. He would have snatched that mic back at her and said, "Excuse me, wrong." Wrong. He would have said that. Wrong. Wrong. Because he says it like that. You're wrong. Wrong. Fake news. That's fake
Wrong.
news.
Sit down. Sit down.
Wrong.
Quiet.
Sit down.
Quiet.
Quiet. I love the one where there's this like there's this reporter during COVID, and he was like, he picked on her, and she was like, "I'm just so surprised," and he was like,
Yeah.
"I can tell you're surprised. You never think." And she was like, "What?" And he was like, "No, nothing."
I remember that one.
But she heard him, and he knew. He was like, "No, nothing." He was like, "You know what? I'm not gonna deal with that right now." But I love that. It's like it's just no fucks given, and man, I miss that.
He'll be back, man. He'll be back.
He'll be back. He'll be back. We're campaigning for him. All right, guys. We're gonna wrap up here. Another great episode. Again, subscribe. We're only a couple away from 100. We're trying to get over that goal. Please subscribe, like, tell your friends, tell your enemies, tell Joe Biden, tell Big Mike, tell Kiki Ojo Thompson. I love her. That's my new wife. And hey, go out there and tell everybody. Tell everybody. KD. If you're also into racial slurs, misgendering, being stupid, just being a fucking retard, go to Crimson Gaming. That's his gaming channel where he has a lot of content which is very gaming and gay and funny. You can find it there, or it's in our description below. You'll find it. And also check our Patreon out, man. $5 a month, and we can continue doing this type of stuff that you guys love. You guys love it. Admit it. Don't be shy.
You guys are lucky. It's not $10 or $20. It's just
we're gonna make it
$5.
I'm gonna make it $100 a month if you don't join. So you better take this discount opportunity. All right?
Better.
You better. If not, you're not racist, and you need to be racist, right, Candy?
If we get one person to join the Patreon, next episode, I'll go shirtless.
Yeah, don't join. Don't do it. Don't do it. Don't do it.
Do it.
Don't
Do it. I'll even put this on short clips.
No, don't do it.
Do it.
All right, we're ending this here. Link in the description, patreon.com/4
Oh,
for the
wait, I'll
number
make
for the Republic.
5 people. 5 people join Patreon.
Negative 5. I'll pay 5 people not to join.
5.
I'll pay
Oh,
you
you
not
wanna
to
see
join.
this?
Negative 5. All right. So we'll see you guys again. Like, subscribe, check out our Patreon, but don't, because we don't want that. But I guess do. And I guess
5 subs.
final message, Karen Deep. Our final message before we sign out.
5 people to join Patreon.
Oh my lord!
Next episode, I'll go shirtless. All right.
That wasn't the message, but
You sure? Come on, you know you want to
done here.
speak.
We're done here, guys. Bye. We're done here.
Wait,
Done.
stay
See you guys
racist.
next
Stay
time.
racist.
There you go.